Please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you know when I got videos. And I started a Patreon page. Got a lot of people asking questions. You know, it's summertime. Everybody's got to fix their stuff and be out on the water. I can't answer every question, and you know, as much as I want to help everybody, provide free content and free things, you know, free advice, you know, how to fix your boat. It does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to make these videos. Between doing the video and editing the video, I do enjoy it. But if you got a specific question, I do have donate to the channel. You can donate to the channel and help me, like, buy some mics, and because I want to buy some wireless mics. Because when me and my brother go out fishing, like, he has a mic but I don't, and he's just off putting it into his phone, and so most of the time you can't hear me. So on our agenda is we're looking at the DJI little mic set. I want to buy that, but you know, it's after taxes and everything, it's close to $400. So right now I'm selling a bunch of old gear that I have. That's I've got it on, like, out a couple places. Just some old mic stands and just a bunch of stuff like that, and I'm just trying to sell it and generate enough money to go out and buy that stuff. And we want to get a couple more cameras. They also think, like, I have a better camera. It was my dad's, but then it's kind of unusable in that, like, the best shots are like the faraway shots because I can zoom in and it looks amazing. I mean, really does. But then when I'm really far away, you know, from the camera, you can't hear me, so I almost can't use it. Anyway, we're working on that stuff. But so, like, if you have, you know, you can ask me questions, but if you know, donate to the channel. If I help you fix your problem, even if it's a couple bucks, it'll go a long ways for me. And anyway, I guess that's like my shameless plug. But it's early morning. It's like Friday morning. So. Okay, everybody, I got another one. It's a Merc 50, and Mercury labeled it as Classic 50. So everybody's all like, oh, those engines are great. Those are the best. Brown stripe. It's all marketing. Let me just say that. It was all marketing by Mercury, and that's really all it was. It was just marketing. Okay, so this engine has got, you know, your typical stator trigger Switchbox coils, 4 coils. So this 1980s or late 80s motors, they had a bunch of different flywheels. For whatever reason, they did. And they had a whole bunch of different stators. Red stators. They had black stators with bolted in magnets. Black stators with glued in magnets. So the bolted in magnets obviously is what you want. Because I have seen the glued in ones come apart in the flywheel. And anyway. So we have a crank, no fire situation. So I've got a little sheet down here. I'm going to put this real big. Crank / no fire. No fire. Okay, so what you want to do is get out your CDI Electronics troubleshooting guide. Hopefully this shows up. So you see there, crank, no fire. Our serial on this engine is OB255, no it's not, OB225117. Alright, I went out there and took a bunch of readings. So this comes from page, I think it's 81. So the top doesn't relate to us. Ours is a 4-cylinder engines with single switch box and 4 ignition coils. And the first thing they tell you is disconnect the black, yellow, or orange wire. It's a stop wire at the switch box and retest. If the engine ignition now has spark, then you got a fault, and that fault is in the key switch harness or in the shift switch. Can also be like the stall, your kill switch. Okay, there's that. So then you're going to disconnect the 2 yellow wires from the stator and the rectifier retest, if you didn't have spark. So if the engine now has spark, replace the rectifier. Alright, well, ours was fine. We still didn't have any spark. Alright, and then we want to check the RPM. And if you got a battery, it's slow cranking, then, it won't spark there either. It's got to have enough spin. So what you do there is take out your spark plug so that it'll really wind up the engine, and then put some kind of spark plug checker on all 4 of those. So it'll spin real fast, and you can check the spark. Alright, the next thing on our troubleshooting guide, okay, is that we want to verify that we have the correct flywheel. Apparently that happened a lot back in the day. And then check the stator resistance and DV output as shown below. So you need to determine what stator you have. So we don't have a red stator. Then we don't know if we have glued-in magnets or bolted-in magnets. And if we look at their own resistance, they're a little different. So we can go by what readings we have. What readings we did get, is with that blue, blue to blue-white. CDI resistance was 6.37K. And then our voltage was 228 volts. So that checked good. And then from red to red-white, they're showing the OEM resistance again, 125. So on the first one, we had 6.3K. So if we look at CDI resistance, it would have been, out of range, but we have OEM resistance up to 5 or 7K. And then red-white, we have resistance up to 155 ohms. So we were reading 149 ohms. We had 39 volts. So with the DVA attached, we had, we were within range, 39 volts. And then on the stator with glued-in.
Okay, let me interject here. I was describing this, and what I realized is that really it's confusing because really we're talking about a flywheel with glued-in magnets, or a flywheel that doesn't have or has bolted-in magnets. So I just want to clarify that a little.
It's a little bit higher voltage, about the same voltage actually. I'm sorry. But the resistance is quite a bit different. So what do we do? Well, for one, we'll have to really probably take the flywheel off and look at what stator we have. So to back up just a little bit, it sounds confusing, and this is what a lot of people get confused about. Really, if you look this part up, and you read this, black stator using flywheel with bolted in magnets. So it's about the flywheel. Really, this is, I think the stators or they're pretty much the same, but that glued in or bolted in magnets is a big deal. And that's going to determine whether or not your stator is within resistance. So you really need to check that. So if the stator is within resistance, is going to be determined by the flywheel and what kind of flywheel you have on it. So then I went ahead and did some other tests, and I measured. I'm going to try to pull this up for you. So between red, white, and red, we both have 45 volts DC. And for blue, white, blue, we have about 280 volts. And that's DC. So when I check these to ground, I get red, white to ground is 45 volts DC. Blue, white to ground, 280 volts. Blue to ground is 272 volts. Red to ground is 45 volts DC. I think the stator's good. What I think is wrong with it is that it needs a new trigger, because when I measure the
wrong, so you're going to connect your readings from your voltmeter to the Switchbox, and what you want to do is you're going to want to disconnect your leads from the stator and the trigger to the Switchbox and retest. So you're going to test it with everything connected, and then you're going to test again with everything disconnected. And with everything disconnected, it's going to tell you, oh, okay, you have low voltage.
And I'll say that when I started my diagnosis on this motor, we had fire on the number 3 cylinder, but we didn't have fire on 1, 2, or 4. So, and it was intermittent. Anyway, you could continue on. If we continue reading, down at the bottom, it's got some asterisks that said this testing is determined if a stator or a pack has a problem. For instance, if you have a spark on any cylinder and the stator's DVA reading is low, disconnect the stator wires and recheck the DVA output. So meaning recheck the DVA output of the stator. If the reading stays low, the stator is bad. If the reading is now within spec, the pack is bad.
Alright, so we got a classic 50. Now, if you don't know about the Mercury Classic 50, pretty much it's all branding. I mean, they just labeled it Classic 50. It's not like the 50 horsepowers, like I have that Merc 500 series. So that's not really what I would consider a Classic 50. But they came out with this engine, in the 80s. And you can see Classic 50. So I don't have the cowl off yet. Take the cowl off, pretty simple. Like most of the old Mercs. Then I had this front plate. Kind of put that down out of the way. Whoa, 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 whoa. We had this front little deal here. I'm just going to set this underneath here. And then we had the top hood, which with the latch comes off. Like that. And I don't know. Let's just maybe set it up here.
So this one, you know, I fixed the trim on this. I fixed the trim on this motor, and then he took it out, and it was like nothing. So I brought it home, and I guess this would be probably big old long series on this diagnosis. This has, see, the Classic 50 had, I mean, what I consider a Classic 50 had a distributor on the other side, but this one has the stator trigger switch box coils, 4 coils. So this is going to be the same for, say, a 3-cylinder. This is a 4-cylinder, obviously, and then you got inline 6. So this would say this controlled 3-pack. This controls 4 cylinders, but they're the same concept, same design. Basically, does 3 cylinders, and then if you have an inline 6, they'll have 2 of these, and one will control 3 cylinders, and then the other one will control the other 3 cylinders. What you're gonna need. You're going to need a meter of some kind that does resistance and then does voltage. Then you're going to need a DVI meter, or DVI adapter, a DVA adapter, I'm sorry. Directed voltage adapter. So you're going to need one of these, because when you're reading the voltage, it's not going to read this is going to average the voltages so that you can read the right voltages. Then you're going to need, like, say, some jumper wires just to connect things. Like on this DVA adapter, you know, it does have these kind of deals, but like my regular leads don't have this, so a lot of times these are good for that. And then the last thing that you're going to need is you're going to need to find a CDI troubleshooting guide, which is on the web, pretty readily available. And then you're going to go to the section that describes your engine. So here's a 4-cylinder engines using Switchbox and 4 ignition coils, and they got several pages. I just printed this off, and you know, even you can see here, like, here's 3-cylinder engines, 76 to 96. So we're talking about that era. We're talking about, say, 78, 79 through like mid-90s. They're all basically the same. And I guess the reason for shooting this video is that this one was kind of a hard one. It wasn't just like one thing showed its rear ugly head and you're like, okay, that's bad. Just to back up a little bit, I did do readings on my stator, and it showed like it was a good stator, although it was really low in voltage when it was connected to the switch box. So what I recommend is, if you can, you know, because I know we want to jump in gung-ho and we want to look at that voltage on the switch box first, where the stator connects to the switch box. But honestly, it's better to just disconnect the stator from the switch box. If you got now this is a crank, so it cranks, but there's no fire. So what I do is what I would say to do is take your stator off, okay, or take all the wires for your stator, just take them all off, and you're gonna have 4 wires basically on this side, and in the middle is a kill switch wire. And that kill switch wire typically goes to this, which is our tilt kind of mechanism that kills the engine. A lot of times I just disconnect these because they don't work. So if they go bad, it's really hard to find why it's bad. or you can just disconnect that wire, and when you crank the engine, if you got spark now, then you got a problem either here, you got a problem with your kill switch, or you got a problem with your ignition switch. Now, these engines, like, you know, you'll hear terminology like CDI, which is, get you where you can look at me. CDI, which is capacitor discharge. So, in the old days, the distributor would produce enough voltage that the caps that were inside of the switch box, you know, they were charging, and then that trigger would tell it to release the charge to the coil. Okay, that was capacitor discharge. Charging the capacitor, discharging the capacitor, fire. In these engines, they're alternator driven, meaning the alternator is the one providing the power. So there is no power from the battery connected to what we would call the power pack. You'll see a couple of red connections, whatever, but all the power is derived underneath the flywheel from the stator. So it powers up the switch box, and in here we still have some capacitors, but then there's small voltage, I'd say between 2 and 6 volts, that tells this switch box when to release. It's like a gate. When to release the power to the coil so that the coil goes out and fires the spark plug. So, you know, your rectifier is typically over here or somewhere on the engine. So right here, I just put that back. But you got 2 yellow wires, and that's gonna provide power to charge your battery. So this is our battery, main battery lug here, and then we got 2 yellow wires, and that's alternating current. And then this is rectified. That's why they call it a rectifier, and it's rectified to, you know, 12 volts, or sometimes it'll go up to 14 volts. Just depends on how much it's got to charge the battery. And then on the other side of the stator, you usually have a red wire, you have a red-white wire, then you have a blue and a blue-white wire. So what you need to do is read the resistance first. Read the resistance between the yellows, and it should be continuity. So like if you have a meter that beeps, it'll tell you like, okay, yeah, it's got continuity. And then the second readings we're gonna do between red and red-white. We're gonna take that reading resistance, and then we're gonna do blue, blue-white. We're gonna read that resistance. And they should be in spec. And one is going to be like a high side of this stator, and the other is going to be a low side. So on ours, we got like 39 volts. So the low side is our problem, and then the high side, that's within spec. So if we look at our specs, generally, you know, like we have to really pay attention to this motor, because we need to find out this has bolted in magnets or glued in magnets, because it makes a difference. So on you know, bolted in magnets is 45 to 55, you know, volts, and then with glued in magnets it's going to be 28 to 32. So if this was 39 volts with a glued in magnet, it's out of spec. And then if it has bolted in magnets, it's out of spec. It's 39 volts low. So I know that this stator is bad. That's the dead giveaway. Now, on this engine, and the reason I'm kind of making this video is because the trigger side is on this side. So we got these 4 that go to the coils. And then if you look, we've got this one, this one, this one, this one is providing the trigger input for the coils. So we got 4 wires. We're going to read our resistance between all of these. And I had to make a bunch of notes. it seemed like on the trigger side we had good resistance. You know, from black to brown we had 800 ohms. I don't know if you can see this, but then from brown to white it doubled. It was like 3.62, but from white to purple we had 800 ohms, and then from white to purple we had 800 ohms. From brown to black we had 800 ohms. And then you want to do all wires to ground, and they should be somewhere, like I said, between 2 volts and 6 volts. And you're going to use your DVI to check your voltage. So always you're going to use your DVI to check your voltage, and you're never going to check it just straight from the meter. DVA adapter. Using your DVA adapter, you got to check the voltage. So when we check the voltage from here to say ground, and just go to like here as a ground, then on this I had no voltage. This is very weird, very odd. Under this flywheel, there's a set of magnets on the outside, okay, and that's gonna pass around this stator coil, and that's one part of this. Now the other part of this is, because this one will have 4 magnets. 3-cylinder had 3 magnets. 6-cylinder has 6 magnets. Then for the trigger, there's bolted on magnets that are on the inside here, and the trigger is just going off of those magnets that are kind of on the inside. So what we really need to do, once we determine, okay, there seems to be a problem with the stator, there seems to be a problem either with the trigger or with our switch box, we're going to take the flywheel off so that we can see what kind of flywheel we have. So I'm almost certain this is a very, like, if you see them kind of gray like this, it's I don't know. This is an area that we need to look and see if we have bolted in magnets or if we have glued in magnets, because it's going to make a difference. So on this engine we had 2 problems. I actually got to run last night for like 30 seconds. One, we have low voltage on the stator, and the high side seems to be fine, but then we don't have any voltage on our rectifier. That's another thing. We take our DVA adapter, and we should get something here that's going to be an AC voltage that's going to drive, here, that's going to drive our rectifier to charge your battery. And you know, if that's not, then you may change. On this engine, I'm going to change the rectifier because they're cheap. I'm also going to change the stator because it's low. I'm going to change the trigger because I have no voltage, and then I'm going to change the switch box. And it's possible that really we only need to change one thing, but this is all showing me some really out of spec stuff, so I think it's just best if I just change them all. Now, it's a very expensive deal. If you're doing OEM, I mean, you're talking $600-700 and going up. And then, you know, there are some aftermarket. I've had real good luck with the jet unit. I've put several on and I haven't had any come back. All the customers know that it's aftermarket. So if it fails, I mean, really the onus is on them, because I would just do OEM. That's me. I'm just going to do OEM, call it a day. But that's not to say that an OEM wouldn't fail too. So it's very possible you get an OEM part that's going to fail. And if it's been sitting on the shelf, like say, because this is an old engine, you know, you might want to think about that, because, you know, electronic parts just sitting around is, you know, especially when they have high energy in them. Like, that's probably what happened with this one. You know, somebody put it in their garage. It's garage cab. You know, they didn't run it very much. Then whenever this owner got it, then, you know, he fired it up. When he fired it up and it provided that much electricity, then maybe it caused it to be weak. We really don't know, and there's no way to really know this, but When we're talking that high voltage, I mean, the high side will go up to like 400 volts. So, yeah, 400 volts DC is still quite a bit. And typically, I think the stator is like a 9 amp. There are like I think the red might go, I say a red stator, I think it may go up to, don't quote me on this, but it may go up almost all the way to 40 amps. So the second thing I would say is when you're checking them and you're going to turn your key to maybe turn this and look at your meter, is take all your spark plugs out, put some sort of way to check your spark or to ground out your spark. So I've shown videos where I've taken just some wire and a wing nut and a little gator clip, and then I just stuffed them in each one of these and ground it out, because you still have fuel and you can disconnect your fuel, but we don't know about any fuel that's in the carburetors, in the bowls. So we don't want fuel spewing this way, and then, you know, we got spark, and then we got fire, and we got problems. So safety first. We're going to make sure that all of these are not able to provide any kind of spark. So, yeah, this one was fine. It took me a while because some things were just adding up. And honestly, I don't see them that often that they're bad. But when they are, they are. And you just have to battle through it. And you got to check one thing at a time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my flywheel. I already know that we got some bad components. I've already talked to the customer and told him what I suggest we do. He's already agreed to it. So we're going to go ahead and replace the stator, the trigger, and the switch box. And then he has a good running boat. Should be for quite some time. And, you know, I may even do a compression test for him just so he knows the compression numbers. This guy's an actual, he used to be a mechanic, so he knows how to do that. But everything else electrically is fine. All the wiring looks intact from the switch, so we don't have a problem there. And I do use my like remote switch thing I use. But and it helps me because when I'm here, I can hook that switch into the battery, and then I can hook, you know, the positive side to the solenoid and just turn it. And you just turn the key on, which really all it does is just the kill wire, you know. So on the kill wire, when the switch is off, you've got ground that's going through the kill wire, which again is like this one right here in the middle. So you got red, white, blue, white, black, white, or black, yellow, black, yellow, and then you got blue and red. And so this is your kill wire. If you're worried about that, just completely remove it. And if you read the CDI little troubleshooting guide, that's one of the first things you do is you disconnect the black, yellow, or orange stop wire at Switchbox and retest. If you got spark, then you got a problem in your remote, you got a problem in your key switch, kill switch, or like I said, this trim limit switch. You got a problem somewhere there. But I've checked this all, and when I turn the switch on, that's another thing. You just go from ground to this kill switch, and you can see that you have continuity. You know that when the key is off, you have continuity to ground, meaning it's killing this. But then say we turn the key to the on position, the ground should go away. And that's how you know it's working.